Hey, folks, James Abrenio coming to you from Abrenio Law, our podcast here. And today we've got a really interesting guest, Chris Falcon. And let me see if I can put his name up there. Chris Falcon, candidate for the clerk of the court of Fairfax County. We don't usually do political guests here and people running for office, but Chris is a good friend of mine. I've known him essentially since I think we both started practicing law. So I said, hey, can you come on, explain what's going on, tell us about the clerk of the court? And he kindly agreed. So Chris, thanks again for coming on. And so thanks again for having you. So
James, you bet. Thanks for the invite. I'm excited for the conversation.
Yeah. So first of all, obviously I know you, but tell whoever's watching, tell us a little about your background. Tell us about your connection with Virginia and particularly Fairfax County.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think I'm one of those few that's actually born and raised here in Fairfax County and has come back and made my home here. I grew up in the area kind of near Falls Church where Route 50 meets Annandale Road. A lot of people know that area kind of between Seven Corners and Lowman's Plaza. But my parents settled there after they immigrated here to the country. My mom from Ecuador, my dad from Peru. They came over in the late 60s and early 70s for my dad and chose Fairfax County because it's an incredibly welcoming place to raise a family. And they had heard that, and that's where they settled here in Falls Church. And I just came up from kindergarten through 12th grade in the Fairfax County public school system. And I graduated from Woodson High School in '99. And then I went to JMU, James Madison University, for my undergrad. And then I did this number between college and grad school where I took a year off and worked for a law firm. My brother had given me advice, which was you really need to figure out before you go if you really want to be a lawyer or not. So I decided to work for a law firm in McLean after I graduated college in 2003. That confirmed I did want to do law. And then I went to do my JD at Widener Commonwealth in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. And I've been back in the area ever since. I came back to Fairfax County because there was work to be done here. And as a Spanish-speaking lawyer, there was no shortage of clients that needed someone to represent them.
Yeah, and let me back up a little bit. So we share a commonality. My dad is first generation from the Philippines. I grew up in Southern Virginia. What was it like as a minority growing up in Fairfax County? What was it like back then? Has it changed? Tell us a little bit about that.
That's a great question. So the part of Falls Church that I grew up in was incredibly diverse, and we lived there till the end of '89. So I went to school with a lot of other kids that were either first or second generation, and a lot of others who, like me, English was not our first language. I learned English in the FCPS school system, man. I went to kindergarten not actually knowing how to speak. And by the end of kindergarten, I spoke perfect English, but I remember my mom taught me a few phrases so I could kind of get around that first week there. But I have a lot of credit to give to the FCPS school system. But incredibly diverse, welcoming place is my recollection of growing up in Fairfax County in the 1980s.
Yeah, I wasn't aware that that English was your second language. I mean, you speak English better than I do now, so it's a good work. Thanks, there. Man. Before we get to running for clerk of the court, tell us a little bit about what you did as a lawyer. And I understand your brother David's a practicing lawyer as well.
He is.
Talk about that and what it was like being a lawyer before you going on to be head honcho of Fairfax.
Absolutely. So I came out of law school and I tried to go work for legal aid. That's what I really wanted to do. I remember for, different legal services in Northern Virginia, the public defender's office. But I also came out right around the time of a recession. So I ended up deciding I want to get experience in trial law. So I went to go work for a personal injury law firm. And I was handed cases right away. It was pretty cool. I was handed a file and said, all right, you have a trial coming up in 2 weeks. Get ready for this. And I just got a number of, bench trials under my belt at the ripe age of 25 or 26. And I liked it. I liked going in front of the court, specifically in Fairfax. I tried a ton of cases in the general district court system and then also in the circuit court system, and tried a number of cases to jury verdicts there, Prince William County, Loudoun County, and got a lot of trial experience before I was even 30 years old. But what I really liked about it was the interaction with clients and people who had had some situation in their life, a lot of times personal injury cases, traumatic injuries that had impacted their life. And they needed someone to convey that to the trier of fact, to the judge, to the jury. And I liked the incredible responsibility that came with that, being able to paint a picture for the judge or jury and explain to them the damages that have been suffered to my clients. So I did that for about 5 years before I decided to make a pivot into the public sector. Because what kept happening, James, was I kept volunteering for legal aid, either the housing clinic at Legal Services of Northern Virginia or others. And it kept calling to me that I felt like I have to go into public service because I feel like there's a greater ability to change, to effect change on a larger basis if I go into another arm of the law, to another area. And that's what ultimately kind of brought me over to the public sector.
Well, tell us a little about your transition from private practice into public service. What did you do, and how did that shape your desire to become a clerk of the court?
Great question. So I decided in 2013 that I would take a break from the active practice of trial law and go work on a political campaign. So that year I shocked a lot of people and said, I'm taking a break. I'm going to go work for McAuliffe and Ralph Northam and Mark Herring and what was known as the coordinated campaign. And I'm just going to run a campaign office here in Fairfax County. And I did that pretty much from June through November of 2013. And it was awesome, man. It was an incredible reset on my professional life to just get back to basics, get out there and talk to voters and Fairfax County residents about why the candidates that I believed in should be elected. And when that ended, I decided I was going to hang my shingle and start my own law practice. And I decided to open up the Falcon firm at the beginning of 2014.
Yeah, and I will tell you, I was one of those that was shocked when you said to me, I'm going to run a campaign office. I didn't see that coming, but I think we had talked about politics, and I knew you had an interest, but I didn't know you were going to go deep dive into it. So that was interesting.
I know my brother and others were a little concerned, like, is everything okay, Chris? I mean, you're a fairly successful lawyer. You have a corner office. Like, is everything all right? But I had a plan.
Talk about opening your own firm. What did that do to educate you about the practice of law and maybe help guide you, and maybe will help, I imagine will help serve as clerk of the court? Like, what was that experience like? And talk about some values you got from that.
So what was really cool was I had been in business school undergrad. So I had the experience of coming up with a business plan and doing feasibility studies and kind of getting a gauge for, is whatever I'm selling, this service, is it needed in the market? Is there a demand for it? And what I kept coming back to over my years of practice was and I keep getting more and more business from word of mouth from my current clients who then refer me to friends and family members. I think there's going to be a market for my services out there. So I took a leap of faith. I did the research. I found out what I needed to do with the Virginia State Bar, with the State Corporation Commission, with Fairfax County to register my business, get a website, start getting stationery, business cards, obviously malpractice insurance, and figure out, and also, most importantly, also have that conversation with my wife, who had been a saint already by being okay with me going on a political campaign. Actually, I'm not sure if she was okay with it, but she believed in me and knew it was going to be all right. But she was excited. She was very supportive in the Falcon firm starting. And it was exciting in February, March of 2014 when I started getting customers signing those retainer agreements. That's the other part of it, right? You know this, putting together all your forms that you're going to need to be able to practice law, your new client agreements, your retainer agreements, your authorization forms, demand letters, all of that good stuff.
How long did you run the Falcon firm? So, because I think it's still in existence now. You're still running it, but it's not full running. Tell me about it.
Right. It's not what it used to be. So it was a litigation practice when I first started it, pretty much from February through August of 2014. So I didn't get very long. before I met Paul Ferguson, and I decided to end the litigation practice. And the firm is now solely estate planning. I do simple wills for people. I closed the litigation practice years ago. But yeah, February through August of 2014. But it was doing well, man. I sometimes I look back and I'm like, I think it would have done fine, but it was doing good work.
Yeah, and tell us, so just so people know, Paul Ferguson is the clerk of the court in Arlington. Talk about how that happened to you transitioning over as and it's your official title is deputy clerk, correct?
So my title has got a bunch of parts: deputy clerk, civil division supervisor, and then legal counsel as well.
Okay. Talk about how that happened, and talk about that experience as your role in Arlington.
Mm-hmm. So I had been introduced to Paul Ferguson, the clerk of the Circuit Court of Arlington County and the City of Falls Church. And it was a conversation that began about needing someone to come in and help out with the civil division. And I think he was impressed that I had experience in civil litigation. And I also was interested in coming into the public sector, as I'd mentioned at the beginning of our conversation. So I applied, they took a chance on me, and here I am 8.5 years later, still running the civil division. And I didn't come in as the legal counsel. That was something that came along later. But it's been an incredible opportunity to work directly with customers every single day. I think you've come in before and you've seen me at work. I've been dealing, pretty much pro se unrepresented litigants are a big part of what we deal with in the civil division of the clerk's office every single day, helping out people that aren't represented by counsel so that they can try to navigate the court system. And I have found it incredibly rewarding. At one point, I was our website person too. So I went on there and I kind of did a deep dive into what we had on our website. Are the forms friendly? Are they fillable? Are the PDFs available to be completed online and submitted to the court? So I've just had I think an amazing experience there, being able to find ways to make the court more accessible for our customers.
And let's back up a little bit. Talk about what the clerk of the court is. I think some people kind of had sort of an understanding, but it's not a sexy position. It's not one where you're seeing people arguing about, putting Trump in jail and all these kinds of things. What is the clerk of the court? How does it work day to day? And then we'll talk about the difference between Arlington and Fairfax.
You're right. It's not sexy. So when I've been out there campaigning for it, I tell people all the time, if the clerk of the court's doing a good job in a jurisdiction, you never hear about them because we're behind the scenes. I was at the clerk's convention this past summer, and I'll get to what it does in just a second, but a circuit court judge described the circuit court clerk as the Wizard of Oz. They're behind the scenes. They're behind the curtain, pulling the strings, making the place work. I thought that was a really cool comparison. But the clerk of the court is a position that actually dates back to colonial times. So 1619, if you can believe it, and the Virginia House of Burgesses. And it's the position that's in charge for keeping the record in the circuit court, managing the civil and the criminal matters, recording all deeds on all land and home sales and purchases, registering all wills for when people pass away, authorizing all notary publics. And some of the other things that we're also pretty well known for is issuing all the jury summonses that go out to all the residents in the jurisdiction. And the clerk of the court position that I'm running for in Fairfax, the jurisdiction is Fairfax County, City of Fairfax, Town of Herndon, and Town of Vienna. So residents in all of those areas are under our umbrella. But the other things too is it has an important public safety role. So we make sure currently that there's a background check performed on each and every single concealed handgun permit application that gets filed with our office. And I think that's a very, very important part of our duty. And we work hand in hand with law enforcement to make sure that that's happening. Also, substantial risk orders, red flag law cases, those come through our office. I personally handle those in Arlington County in the City of Falls Church. So it's not a rare occurrence that I'll walk in on a Monday morning and find one that was executed over the weekend. And now I got to get the ball rolling on opening up a civil case for that, contacting the court and the judges to make sure we get a hearing before that expires, coordinating with law enforcement to make sure that everyone's been served with notice of that hearing.
Mhm.
So that's just like 7 or 8 of the 800 plus duties that the
Mhm.
clerk of the court has. And I'm proud to say, I think I've done almost not all of them, but like a big chunk of those 800 over my past 8.5 years with the circuit court clerk's office.
Now, obviously, Fairfax County is much larger than Arlington.
Hmm.
Um, Talk about what the trend. Let's assume you win. And by the way, when is the election, and when would you take office? Just for people
Yep.
watching.
So I'll be seeking the Democratic endorsement, and currently the Democratic primary is set for June 20th.
Mhm.
So if I have an opponent, I'll be running in that primary on the 20th. But the
Okay.
general election is coming up next November
Okay.
2023,
And you would take office when?
January 2024.
Okay.
January,
Let
yeah, beginning of January.
let's say it's January 2024. You got the clerk of the court hat on. Talk about the differences between Fairfax and Arlington, and we're talking about size, really. I
Yep.
think primarily, well, not primarily, but the big thing. Um, what are you going to do, and how do you plan to step in day one and be prepared for the change just in volume alone?
Yep, absolutely. So we're talking about a jurisdiction of about 200,000 compared to one of 1.2 million,
Mhm.
right? It's a huge difference. And that really drives home the importance of having good systems in place,
Mhm.
good procedures. Right now, one of the things that I've been talking a lot about is there needs to be greater online case information access in the
Mhm.
Fairfax Circuit Court.
Mhm.
Right now, people that get sued, let's say someone gets sued, someone comes into the court right now, files a lawsuit in circuit court. The person that's been sued can't log into the free website that the Virginia Supreme Court runs to find out, to plug in their name and find out what's been filed against me, who
Mhm.
is suing me.
Mhm.
None of that's available for free right now. So they end up having to either call the court, call the clerk's office, or go in person. So really, the important part is having processes that will be able to be replicated like we have in our county, in our jurisdiction, in a much larger one. But online case information access is a big one.
Mhm.
The other part too is just having the different divisions working together in tandem. In the circuit court clerk's office, you have the civil division, which I run, and then you also have a criminal division, a land records division, a probate division, and then some courts like Fairfax have a court services office that does
Mhm.
marriage licenses and notary commissions and things like that. But you have to have the captains and the heads of those divisions meeting with the clerk and the chief deputy clerk to make sure that everything is humming and that all processes are go. I think communication is just very key for that when
Mhm.
you're talking about jumping up to a jurisdiction of that size.
Mhm. Um, Now it sounds like, what I recall, you've had, in addition to Arlington, you've had some other experience with online e-filing and things like that. Talk about that.
Yeah. So my first internship in the legal system was actually during college.
Mhm.
The summer before my senior year at JMU, I went to go work for an attorney in DC who brought me on to basically do his e-filing.
Mhm.
So in the summer of '02, I was helping the attorney file his pleadings into the federal court e-filing system. And that was awesome. I mean, I enjoyed it. I've always been a little bit of a tech nerd.
Yeah.
You probably can tell, but I like learning a new program and
Mhm.
figuring out its ins and outs. Obviously, reading the information, the guide for it first, and then going in, jumping in, playing around with it, and then contacting the clerk's office. I remember doing that because I had a couple of questions before I filed my first pleading to make sure I wasn't going to mess this up.
Mhm.
And that was when I learned kind of early on, if you're not sure, good idea to give the clerk's office a phone call and just, come hat in hand and say, hey, I'm so and so from this office. I had a quick question. I'm doing this for the first time. I have found over my career, if you come that way, most of the time you're going to get people that are very willing to help you out.
Mhm.
And I have found that with clerk's offices all over the area, DC, Virginia, Maryland. There are very, very helpful clerks at the Fairfax Circuit Court Clerk's Office. I want to make that clear. I've been there as a practitioner. I've come to their counters, and they are lovely.
Yes.
So I just have some ideas about some system processes that we can make hum a little bit better. More things that I think we can put on the public, like finding their own case information without always having a call for that,
Mhm.
without having to come in person. I find it incredibly inefficient when I see people that have to go from South County to Fairfax City to find their case information or to get a copy of a record that they should have been able to request online. But yeah, no, that summer 2002, I learned the e-filing system in DC in the federal court. And then it was a shock to me after I graduated law school 5 years later, and found that the e-filing hadn't been implemented into the county court system here in Virginia. So, Arlington's been on it now for 10 years. It's time we get Fairfax there as well. And I know there's a pilot program, but we can expand it.
Yeah, and I can tell you, I can attest the fact that I've been practicing 15 years, and I still regularly call clerks' offices and suck up and tell them I have no clue what I'm doing. And they are always kind, every jurisdiction. And so for any young lawyers, my biggest piece of advice for any of you, be nice to judges, clerks, be nice to the clerks of the court. You go in there with a bad attitude, that is how you destroy your reputation that you've worked hard to maintain. And
James, you're so right, because we remember those names. But we also remember the people like you that are very kind, and they talk to the judges too. So I appreciate you saying that.
Yeah, and I also, from a e-filing standpoint, in Fairfax, it does have a pilot program. In fact, I was just on a Zoom call with somebody. They're starting to sort of implement it, and they're making efforts, and it'll be great to see you come in there and pick up the ball running 100%. But I even think about it not from just like as lawyers, it would be awesome, easy, it would save our time, money. But I also think about the indigent people that don't have a lot of free time. They're working 3 jobs and then have to go into the clerk's office just to get a piece of paper. It just doesn't make any sense. And if we're talking about environmentalists and things like that, the gas just driving in, it doesn't make sense. The technology is there, now is the time. So I'm excited about seeing what you're able to do. Something near and dear to my heart, expungements. Talk about what you plan on doing there. And I understand you're involved in some expungement clinics. Talk about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So for those that may not be aware, expungement is a law in Virginia that allows people to petition the circuit court to remove criminal charges from their record for things they were not found guilty of, right? Things they were acquitted, better, but things they were found not guilty of, acquitted, or null prost. And one of the first things I did when I got to the circuit court clerk's office in Arlington was also, like I said, review all of our pages on our website. But I found that our expungement page needed some work. So I went through there. I'd had the experience of actually representing people in expungement matters before. So I thought of it from what would a lawyer like to see? But I also thought, what would someone need to know if they were representing themselves in this? And I thought of it from that perspective, from the pro se, from the unrepresented party's perspective. And I just completely revamped that website, that section of it. I put up a fillable PDF of our petition form, a step-by-step process on what you need to do if you want to file one in our jurisdiction, how much the filing fee is, where you mail it to, what form of payment we accept, where you need to go to get your fingerprints done after you've filed it, and the process to get your hearing so that the judge can sign off on your order, granting it or actually denying it if there's been an objection filed by the Commonwealth. But one of the things that we recently did in Arlington was we held a free expungement clinic in partnership with our Commonwealth Attorney's Office. And, this was something I had seen other jurisdictions try and do. Earlier in the year, Prince William County ran a couple of successful expungement clinics. And I had shared with their clerk that I was very impressed with that. And so when our Commonwealth Attorney reached out to us, we jumped at the opportunity, James. It was an amazing experience. Took a lot of planning, a lot of sweat capital from the Commonwealth Attorney's Office, from the clerk's office and our staff. But a couple of Saturdays ago, we had 38 people show up from 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. And actually, let me walk that back. There were people waiting in their car for hours before we opened our doors to come in, get free legal assistance, have staff from our office assist them with the completion of forms, have staff from the Commonwealth Attorney's Office review their forms, have pro bono defense attorneys be there to review everything with them, and file it and have the filing fees covered by community organizations, so that they would walk out of that. It was held at Arlington Presbyterian Church, which was also on a Saturday, I think a great service to the community, because we have a lot of customers that simply can't get off of work during the Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. Time slot. So I was really happy. And we heard from multiple people that came there that they were able to make it because it was on a Saturday and not Monday through Friday. But yeah, 38 people came, 19 petitions for expungement filed. And yeah, I got eyes on those, and I'm tracking their way through the system, and pretty hopeful that a large percentage of those will end up on granted expungements, so that these individuals can get these charges off their record. The reminder, these are things they were not convicted of. Right. So they've had a shoplifting charge that was null prost on their record for 10 plus years. We had someone say it came up when they tried to apply, I think, for a security guard job. So these are things that have prevented them from being able to get jobs, to get housing. We had one individual that came and said he's applying for college right now. And so it's really important to him that that not be on his record. I get it. So I was really proud of that collaboration between our office and the Commonwealth's office and all the nonprofits that showed up that day. I mean, it was a packed house. It was awesome. I'm excited to do our next one, hopefully mid next year.
Well, I can tell you, we will, especially here in Fairfax, you know, we will be offering our services. Like I said, I'm a big fan of expungement nonprofit work.
Thank you, James. I want to bring it to Fairfax.
Yeah,
I mean, this is something that needs to come to Fairfax. We actually had one person show up because he had Fairfax charges.
Yeah.
And I had to tell him, I'm sorry, this is only for our jurisdiction. I said, but keep your eye on the news over there.
Well, and I complain a lot, you know, about the current state of our expungement system, because we're one of the most archaic systems in the state, in the country. And it's tragic that you can be acquitted of a charge, but you have to file a separate, essentially, lawsuit. Now, as you know, in 2025, assuming the law holds, we're going to have a lot of changes and for good. A lot of things are going to be automatically expungible, and then there are other things that are going to be eligible for expungement where they otherwise weren't. Are you already looking down the road about what needs to be done in order to accommodate? Because I imagine there's going to be a flood of petitions that weren't otherwise coming down the pike. What's your thoughts about that?
There's going to be a lot of work to do there. Yeah. In 2025, the clerks have been talking about it. I attended the Virginia Circuit Court Clerks Association convention over the summer. And there's a lot of concern about the number of, hours that it's going to take, days, weeks, months to get that done. My feeling on it is, yes, it's going to be a lot of work, but it's the right thing to do. So we're obviously going to have to, get some additional help in to get that done, but it's absolutely the right move.
Yeah. I mean, I was talking to somebody else about this the other day. It's like, I never thought in 15 years of practice, I never thought the changes would come that are coming. So it's a really exciting time to be a Virginian. There's a lot of weird things happening. You'll see national and everything, but Virginia has a lot of hope, especially when it comes to criminal justice reform.
One of the other things I want to say real quick about the expungement clinic, was it's another example. You hear the phrase a lot, like meeting people where they are. But that was an example of what it means to meet people where they are, to bring the services of that office out into the community. And, I had thought there might be the possibility it would just be me from the clerk's office and probably Paul Ferguson, my boss. But when I put it out there, we had a ton of people from our office say, I want to be there. I'll come and work that day. And that was awesome. That was really moving to see the number of people that wanted to be part of that.
And that's great to hear. And again, I heard great things about it, and I expect there will be more. So I'm excited to be involved and look forward to what you're able to do there, along with a lot of community help. Let's talk about, we talked about the beginning, Spanish was your first language. Talk about how important that is as a clerk of the court in Fairfax, and how you think that's going to bring a lot of value to that office that you hope to serve.
Yeah, absolutely. So language access is another part about meeting people where they are. I believe that the staff in the clerk's offices around the Commonwealth should reflect the diversity of the jurisdiction that they represent. So I'm a big fan of hiring diverse workforce that reflect that diversity, speak different languages. Whenever we can, we try to bring in staff that speak Spanish, that speak Arabic, Amharic, Korean, Vietnamese, Mongolian. I think we're about to lose our Portuguese speaking staff member at my office, but we're going to do everything we can to continue to bring folks that speak other languages. I joked with a friend, but it wasn't really a joke, that I think I spoke more Spanish than English one day at the office. We have a lot of people that live here and they are more comfortable speaking in their native language. And there's nothing wrong with that. If they come, they have a constitutional right to be where they are and be doing the work that they're doing in their case. And it helps. It's awesome when you see that look of relief on someone's face when they come up to your counter and they say, "Habla español?" And then I'm able to just launch right into Spanish and assist that person. But when we don't have staff that speak a particular language, I also showed my staff the awesome resource that the Virginia Supreme Court has for calling in and talking to the language office and saying, "We have someone here who speaks this language. Do you have someone available right now that can either come here? And if not, can we get a teleconference set up with someone that speaks that language?" I have that posted on our office wall so that people never have a reason to turn anyone away for lack of language availability.
Well, and the last several years, over the last several years, I've seen a lot of just great advancement. Our bench has gotten more diverse, and that's just been great. I used to be a public defender, and I still represent a lot of people, minorities, and it's great when you start to see the diversity reflected, not just in staff, but in the people making decisions. And I think, obviously I'm a big supporter of yours, but I think for the community, it'd just be great to see you come in, and just to see your face up there means a lot. Now,
thank you. I mean, I don't know. I highlight on my website that I'm very proud that English is not my first language. And I think that hopefully is something that will resonate because it's informed my perspective on how we run that office. I told people this morning, actually, earlier in the day, that I really, really love that we treat everyone with empathy and respect. And that will be a guiding principle for me in the Fairfax Circuit Court Clerk's office.
Well, I'm super excited. So give me just a moment. I'm going to share. You got a fancy flyer, and part of the reason I'm sharing this, number one, if my brother ever happens to see this, I told you look exactly like my oldest brother Joe.
You like that mid-90s haircut right there?
Hey, at this point, I'd kill for that hair. But let's go down here, and it looks like you got a lot of endorsements. Talk about your endorsements from local leaders, and why does that matter? Why should anybody care what other local leaders here in Virginia have to say about potential clerk of the court?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a first-time candidate, so I reached out and I cold called some of these folks. Now, some are people like our sheriff, Stacey Kincaid, who I have a long-standing relationship with. I've known her for a number of years. I asked for meetings with most of these folks, and I pitched them on my ideas for the office and my experience. I'm 8.5 years working in the Circuit Court Clerk's office, but I also have ideas on things that we can improve to make the office more accessible, more efficient, and provide a greater service. So most of these folks I just sent an email to. Some I knew, some I didn't, and I pitched them on why we could make this office so much more accessible for the residents of the jurisdiction. And as a first-time candidate, it's a big deal to get an endorsement from someone like George Barker, Scott Servell, Paul Krizek, our Virginia state senators from the Northern Virginia area, a large number of Virginia state delegates, and also members of the Fairfax County Board of Supervisors, the school board, and my boss, the clerk of the court. I was glad he endorsed too. But yeah, they've given legitimacy.
We have a very different discussion right now. And I can tell for people watching this that don't know, Scott Servell is a very well-known senator, but he's also a very good attorney. Marcus Simon is a real estate attorney, well-known in that field. Chap Peterson We don't see eye to eye on a lot of things, but he is a very good trial attorney. So for people in the game, in the trial game, as lawyers are lawyers, I can tell you those endorsements, it's substantive. And so it's great to see. I imagine there's probably other people on that list because this list, I know you gave it to me. It's probably,
yeah, that list actually is not current. I've had
Yeah.
a few that have signed on since there, but yeah, absolutely. The lawyer legislators, to get them signed on to this was big for me. And each and every one of those meetings, I remember something from. But what I think it helps is that I've had the perspective of trying cases in the jurisdiction. I've also had the perspective now of working in the clerk's office, managing a clerk's office. And I think those things inform the way I'll also manage the office. But yeah, very, very humbled by that list for sure.
Yeah, and Chris, one of the things I'll say, I've been relatively politically active, and anybody that knows me knows I'm kind of a left-wing nut a bit. What I've liked about your talk about the clerk of the court, and you can talk, I asked you to talk a little bit about this. You don't seem to be taking this from a political angle about Democrats versus Republicans. Talk about how, in your view, if that's the case, this isn't about politics, and talk about why it matters to have substance in that position.
Thank you for saying that. I appreciate it. The office of the clerk of the court is nonpartisan. I mean, I'm not being a partisan when I'm carrying out the administration of justice, because that's what we're doing. We have statutory duties that are set out by the Code of Virginia, and we're there to carry out those duties. I've also said, like I said at the beginning, clerks of the court don't get in the news usually unless we're doing something we shouldn't be, like refusing to issue someone a marriage license after the Virginia Supreme Court has already ruled on that. But in my opinion, this is nonpartisan. I am a Democrat, but the administration of justice, not wearing that hat when I'm carrying it out. I do believe in some things like equitable access that some people may associate with Democrats, and not ashamed of that. I wear it like a badge of honor. I'm all about bringing these services out into the community and letting my neighbors that live in places that are not as close as to Fairfax City as I am here in Annandale have greater access to that. I find it incredibly, I think, shameful, really, to be honest, when we force someone to have to take time off of work, take time away from their family, and have to physically come to a courthouse to get a public record that they should have been able to request on their phone and pay with a credit card. It's 2022, soon to be 2023. That's something I look forward to introducing, that ability to have technology be the great equalizer for a lot of our neighbors. I don't want people wasting their time anymore.
Well, look, that's good to hear. Let me give you the floor for whatever you want to say to the public, anybody considering voting for you, or just trying to figure out what the heck the clerk is. What do you want to tell the audience for the 5 people watching?
Well, I would tell them that, again, my name is Chris Falcon. I'm running for the Fairfax Clerk of the Circuit Court. I've been working for the clerk's office for the past 8.5 years. I'm a lifelong Fairfax County resident, business owner, and I'm very happy to say I have 3 beautiful kids, Christopher, Chase, and Gracie, ages 7, 4.5, 2.5. I want to bring the services of this office out into the community. I want to use technology more than the current office is using to make those services available to all people. Too much right now is reliant on in-person business, people physically coming themselves to the courthouse to get records, to do filings. I want our phones and our computers to be able to do some of that work for us. I'm one of those let's work smarter, not harder type people. And I think we can utilize technology a little better than we are currently doing in that office. I also want to provide world-class customer service. So if you speak a language other than English, we can also serve you in that language. And also, customer service should be something we're constantly working on. I've conducted customer service trainings in our office so that we remember that our customer, our constituent, it has to be at the center of everything we do. We should be constantly thinking about the services that we are providing to them. And then in the end, the other pillar of my campaign, along with accessibility and service, is efficiency. We're going to improve efficiency if we implement these things. We're going to save money on paper, on transportation costs by being able to utilize technology to make everyone's life easier. Too much right now also relies on the U.S. Postal Service. Too many attorneys I know still send a letterhead with a request and a check, or actually it has to be a certified check under the current rules, or a money order to request a document be returned to them with a self-addressed stamped envelope, relying on the U.S. Postal Service. There are other jurisdictions doing that electronically on their website as we speak in the Commonwealth of Virginia. So I would just tell the voters, I'm here to improve the efficiency, accessibility, and service of this office. I hope they give me a shot next year.
Well, look, Chris, I appreciate
FalconForFairfax.com.
FalconForFairfax.com. So I will, I'll put that in the show notes. If anybody has any questions that's watching this, you can comment below. You can send us questions, and I'll put the contact information in show notes. And I'll also put a link to Chris's website so you can learn more about him. So again, Chris, thank you so much for taking the time. I'm excited to see what you're going to do. I'm excited to the advancements you're going to bring to Fairfax County, making my job easier, but more importantly, making every citizen of Fairfax job easier. So thanks again, man. And I look forward to talking to you soon. Okay.
James, thanks for having me on, and I'll be reaching out to you to come help out with that expungement clinic in 2024.
Absolutely.
Have a good one, everyone.